So I guess one thing I'd like to continue thinking about is dreams, and specifically, I'm interested in the geography of dreams. I'm interested in the geography, the terrain of dreams, and how that can mm, symbolize the degree of intensity of the dream. Or maybe, in fact, that may be a better place to start, is the degree of intensity of the dream. Because the fact that that corresponds to different geographies is then like secondary almost. Uh, the fact, to introduce the topic a little bit, the idea that the top of a mountain is an intense place, or the bottom of a well or of a cave, the fact that sometimes in a dream you can be advancing to a certain place. You can be dreaming that you're descending deeper into deeper levels of some building or some cave or something, or you can dream that you are climbing up some big staircase or up some mountain. I'm interested in these sorts of weird geographical things, but mainly because of how they track intensity. And so I guess first I would need to talk about what intensity in dreams is. I think that dreams can be more or less intense, and that in itself is a trip. Because I think I first realized that when I started dream journaling, because I'd always heard that when you dream journal, your dream recall increases, it improves, and it does. You are able to write several pages of dreams every night. But from the outside, it may seem as if all that that's doing is that before you remembered this amount of dreams, now you're remembering this amount of dreams. But it's not just a uniform amount of dream. It's also the intensity of the dream. That is to say, you're able to remember dreams, or let's say dream experiences, let's call them dream moments of the dream that are more intense than others. And they're more intense for you because they awake a stronger emotional, physical, and even intellectual response. They're dreams that seem to really drive the emotions, body, and intellect to places that they hadn't gone before, maybe. Right? And so you realize that you start to remember these kinds of dreams because your dream recall is increasing. That is to say, you're being able to remember things that you weren't remembering before. And you sort of see for yourself the clear kind of Freudian distinction between dreams where there is a lot of ego censorship and dreams where there is less and less ego censorship, right? And that the dreams that have less ego censorship and therefore contain more what is called repressed content, but I'm not sure if that's the right term, but what includes more repressed content is usually just not remembered that much, right? That's the whole point. Uh, so, mm, okay, that's better. If there is, yeah, there is less memory of them, it sort of suggests that there is a strange continuity between memory in dreams and your ability to withstand that emotion or that idea consciously, mm, right? Your desire to do so, I guess. things that you don't want to remember, you won't remember. So when you force yourself to remember by keeping a dream journal and therefore naturally sort of stretching your memory, you end up remembering things that in your normal unstretched state of awareness you don't want to remember. So you end up remembering all these intense things. And so there's this interesting link, and it sort of suggests that the more you remember your dreams, there is the potential, at least, to remember dreams that are deeper in the dream world somehow. They're mm, they're harder to gain access to, right? They're hidden underground, and in order to get to them, there is more of a quest and a search to get there. Mm. So let's return a second to the geography thing. What confuses me in a good way, what I find amazing, is that there seems to be a connection between this and the actual geographical terrain of the dream worlds themselves. And when I started noticing this in my own dream journal, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really crazy. But I thought it was just, the specific way in which my dreams were manifesting for me, right? Because I have a lot of friends who are interested in dreams and dream journaling, and whenever I asked them about their dreams or we shared our dreams with each other, um, their dreams would generally have a different character than mine, right? They would involve different things. They would clearly revolve around different kinds of fears or different kinds of aesthetics. So, so there is that, and that needs to be taken into account. But then the question is, I guess the question is, can you find uh, can you find other people who share traits in your dreams that you do? Well, yeah, right. And in a sense, again, Freud as like one of the first people in at least the the Western philosophical scientific tradition to do this, I guess. I'm not sure. Saw that, yeah, obviously, if you have enough patience, right? That's the thing. It's a matter of data in a sense. If you just talk to enough people and ask them all about their dreams for long periods of time, you will see patterns between them, right? And Freud said this is like, many of my patients have this kind of dream or this other kind of dream or this other kind of dream, and you see that there are dream types that are shared amongst people, right? But mm, but Freud focused on a specific thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Jung, however, goes somewhere else. He goes a little bit beyond that. Uh, or maybe to me, it feels like Jung goes beyond because, again, there's this geographic aspect. It feels to me as if Jung is going further away in space, maybe because he is getting to some place that is of interest to me. And so maybe that's why I perceive it as a thing that is distant in space. And especially because the thing that he discovers relates to this aspect of, I think, distance and uh, geography as signaling importance, because he finds that there are mm, mountains that you can climb that take you to important places. There are caves that you can go down into that take you into important places, right? He discovers these things in all sorts of mm, not only his patients' dreams, but also mythology, literature, song, whatever, right? That there seems to be a way in which we associate geography to certain epiphanies. You go up to the top of the mountain and you have an epiphany there. You go down into the depths of the cave and you have some sort of spiritual conversion there, right? The whole thing with the hero's journey trope, right, is you descend down into the underworld and something happens in the underworld. It's not just, the underworld isn't just the same type of geographical location as the top. The fact that you've descended down into space corresponds to some sort of process in you, in your soul, to the point where when you reach these intense places, the place melds with the experience. I think that's the point, that there are these places geographically in these stories where when you reach them, you somehow, the closer you get to them, the more your inner world becomes synchronized with the outer world, you could say. And that seems to have some effect. So I'm getting a little bogged down in this, so I want to try and go back to dreams specifically, because again, what I found crazy about reading Jung is seeing that he was recording this kind of stuff. So it wasn't just my dreams, it's not just the individual person's dreams. There is some way in which dreams about going up have a certain kind of resonance for people, and dreams about going down have a certain kind of resonance for people. And that the further you go up into these extreme landscapes, the top of mountains, the bottom of caves, to the extent that you descend to these places, the dream becomes more intense, and therefore the recall of the dream becomes more difficult. So that's the crazy thing I find, is that whenever I remember more and more dreams, it's not just that I'm remembering, again, it's not just a matter of quantity, like you're remembering a longer story. Like first you just knew the short kind of summary version, but then once you have a good dream recall, you can recount the whole dream with loads of details. It's not just that, it's that the process of recall itself and the process of the increase of recall is part of the dream itself, and it's part of the dream's story. So it's not just that's the thing, it's not just that remembering the dream is a way of remembering the dream, it's that remembering the dream is dreaming somehow. That you can, okay, try and say it some other way. You can remember the way we picture it sometimes is as if dream recall is just you as some sort of a neutral observer peeking into the dream and gaining more access of it, as if the dream is taking place behind the scenes and you just gain more and more of a peek into it. And you can wake up and be like, today I remember 5 or 6 pages of dream, right? And you could say to yourself, that dream was happening anyway, so I could have not remembered it, but I did, because I trained myself to peek into the dream. I don't think that's entirely what's happening. I think that may be part of it, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening from my experience with dream journaling and from what people like Jung seem to be recording, which is that the very fact of observing the dream is what the dream is about somehow, and therefore it is what's happening in the dream. if the dream seems to be sometimes explaining the process by which you descend down into locations like caves and so on, or you go up into places, or you traverse huge deserts, or, you know, if all of and these geographical adventures in the dream are ways in which, the dream ego is getting closer and closer to repressed contents. That is to say, if the perilousness of the geography represents the degree of repression of the content, and therefore the process of the dream ego clambering up into some perilous place means that the dream ego is getting closer and closer to repressed contents, then the closer and closer the dream ego gets, it means that the dream ego is remembering more and more of the dream. That is to say, the more you wake up with a deeper sort of memory of the dream, the closer that dream, the closer it means that dream has gotten to the content. Hmm. So I think that's pretty crazy. I think that's really interesting. Uh, Especially in light of what I was trying to touch upon in the last video I made about dreams, that basically it seems that, beyond all this stuff, which is already very interesting, when you start to incorporate the idea that dreams are, the sort of Buddhist uh, idea, or just, I guess, the idea of mysticism in general, that dreams are the same kind of thing as reality in general, then it feels as if the process that you're undergoing with dreams is that in order to remember that difficult content, the content that stretches you emotionally and intellectually and physically, the process of being able to withhold that, not withhold it, to kind of to, to be with it, to bear it in some way, that process, mm, what it means is that if you remember that content which you didn't remember before, it means you're accepting of it in a way that you weren't before. Right? Before, you didn't want to see that. You didn't want to partake of it. I would even say that you didn't want to identify with it. Not identify, but like empathize or feel love for it. What the dream does in a weird way is that it gets alien and alien. It gets more and more alien the deeper you go into it. And it connects to this geography thing. It really feels as if the deeper you get geographically into the bowels of whatever the dream is saying, the more and more difficult, but not just difficult, it's alien in the sense that, because it's emotionally difficult, so that has uh, the classic aspect of repression to it, that it can be just very, very like, mm, obscene kind of id content, or painful kind of emotion that you don't want to confront. But the thing is that's weirdly connected to the intellectual side, which is that sometimes the deeper you get into the dream, the weirder and weirder the ideas become. So to be able to hold that and bring it back in some way, not bring it back, but to, that's the thing. I don't want to bring it back. I want to be able to hold it in some way, to hold space for it, to allow it to exist. it it feels therefore as if what the dream is doing is that it's stretching your ability to love, maybe, because it brings you closer and closer in contact with the other, with the absolute other. And the deeper you go into it, the more other it becomes. But in order to even access that, in order to even remember and be aware of what's happening, you need to be able to, it needs to, to not trigger the ego enough for the ego to hold space for it. So it's funny, it really feels like one idea that comes to mind is that the dream is some sort of a weird process by which you develop your love in general. Things are shown to you that you find difficult to love because they're so other to the kind of things that are that are close to your ego sphere. And the dream is weirdly sort of putting you in touch with that in a way that's alluring too. It awakes this spirit of adventure where you want to know and you want to go into the depths in the dream. But at the same time, it's something that you don't want to know and you don't want to know about. So anyway, those are things I want to think about. I'm also interested in the way that the dream then, as I was saying in the other video, it begins with you very often. You are the protagonist of the dream. But as Freud showed, right, you very often in dreams do things that you wouldn't do in waking life. You slowly become a person that basically isn't you. And that's why I want to talk about this, because I think that if you take exclusively the traditional Freudian perspective, it seems as if at all stages of the dream, you're always dealing with you, or that you're always dealing with something that is in somehow relative to the human. But I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that precognitive dreams and other experiences like these point to the idea that it isn't true, that it somehow extends beyond what we call the human. So that I think it's good to let go of the dream as something non-you. In fact, if you can hold space for the dream as something other, I think that allows to something, I guess, some dialogue. You allow it to speak for itself, and you are talking to it as an interlocutor, and you're not just sort of examining yourself as if everything that you're looking at in the dream is you. If you allow it to be itself, and of course the process that makes this weird is that you tend to be the protagonist of the dream. So that's the funny thing, that you begin the dream in the, let's say, the non-intense, the shallows of the dream. The dream ego is very similar to you, to your waking ego, very often just the same kind of person. But the deeper you get into the dream, the more and more distance there becomes between who you are in the dream and who you are in waking life, to the point where in the dream you literally are someone else, or you become someone else, in a way that isn't integratable into your ego personality, or that has even much to do with your waking ego personality. I think that the dream is some weird process by which you experience your ego becoming another ego, someone else. You experience self becoming other through a weird gradation. Jumping to a lot of conclusions here, but that's the sense I get. And that maybe that's sort of the lure that is used. That because the ego is something known and friendly, it's comfortable. You begin comfortable in the dream because it's comfortable terrain. It's your known environment. But that gives you the confidence to continue, but the deeper you go, the less you are yourself from the waking perspective, and the more you are yourself from the dream perspective. Then being able to reflect on the waking as someone else. Yeah. I think it's important to think about these things precisely in the light of paranormal experience, because if you don't have a model to incorporate paranormal experience into, it being shoved into the standard status quo model is just going to make you insane, I think. So we need new models that take into account this sort of epistemology, this literal sort of like personally acquired knowledge that is precognition or so on, synchronicity, which it is sort of data that has been collected by the ego, that anyway, yeah, that needs to be used in crafting or transforming the models that we have. But so I'm interested in the way that the dream becomes this sort of weird lure. It reminds me so much of psychedelics as well. How, I mean, Terence McKenna spoke of this, and I had a few experiences like this where the psychedelic experience begins friendly, and there, as Terence McKenna described it, there's mice with candy bars and there's fun, jovial stuff. And it seems as if that is a honey that lures you in because it's sweet. It seems to respond to things that you yourself would consider to be friendly and known and whatever, that maybe evoke warmth in you in some way. And then as you follow this honey, the honey slowly transforms into something really terrifying and other, to the point where it transcends terror. It's not exactly terror, it's really a confrontation with the other, with something other, right? Which then, if you can hold on to that, as Terence McKenna said, you can return to wakefulness, sober wakefulness, and reincorporate some of this knowledge, right, that has been acquired through this sort of epistemology back into. I'm maybe not using the word epistemology correctly here, I'm not sure, but you can bring it back to the tribe, and therefore it can reconfigure the ways in which the tribe is talking about itself and talking about the world. So I find it interesting that the psychedelic experience seems to use the same sort of method, right? It really follows that dreams are the same thing, or they follow the same mechanisms as the psychedelic experience, I think, in that at the shallower, comfortable sides of the thing, it can be dream material that's non-threatening, but as you descend down, it becomes truly sort of strange and almost, it's something that stretches the limits. And I like the idea of stretching, because it's not necessarily that you need to attain that fully, the way that Icarus doesn't need to attain the sun, because if you reach the sun you get burnt, right? I feel that maybe it's more literally like some sort of a gym, that you're stretching your uh, your ability to be close to the sun without ever actually touching it. Something like that. That again is maybe what Terence McKenna's encounters with the machine elves in DMT are somehow like. That the machine elves would ask McKenna to imitate them, to do what they are doing. So there is some sort of a practice that they're doing. There's something they're doing which McKenna needs to learn and practice to do. So anyway, yeah, I think we have a direct access to this sort of stuff in dreams, but it's such a powerful medicine in a way that it's hard to know how to deal with it and approach it, yeah, in a way that's that's good. So yeah, some thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.